Introduction: Richard Cantillon. Richard Cantillon, 1680s May 1734, was an Irish-French economist and author of Essays sur la nature du commerce en général, Essay on the Nature of Trade in General, a book considered by William Stanley Jevons to be the cradle of political economy. Although little information exists on Cantillon's life, it is known that he became a successful banker and merchant at an early age. His success was largely derived from the political and business connections he made through his family and through an early employer, James Bridges. During the late 1710s and early 1720s, Cantillon speculated in, and later helped fund, John Law's Mississippi Company, from which he acquired great wealth. However, his success came at a cost to his debtors, who pursued him with lawsuits, criminal charges, and even murder plots until his death in 1734. Essay remains Cantillon's only surviving contribution to economics. It was written around 1730 and circulated widely in manuscript form, but was not published until 1755. His work was translated into Spanish by Gaspar Melchor de Jovellanos, probably in the late 1770s, and considered essential reading for political economy. Despite having much influence on the early development of the theocrat and classical schools of thought, Essay was largely forgotten until its rediscovery by Jevons in the late 19th century. Cantillon was influenced by his experiences as a banker, and especially by the speculative bubble of John Law's Mississippi Company. He was also heavily influenced by prior economists, especially William Petty. Essay is considered the first complete treatise on economics, with numerous contributions to the science. These contributions include his cause and effect methodology, monetary theories, his conception of the entrepreneur as a risk-bearer, and the development of spatial economics. Cantillon's essay had significant influence on the early development of political economy, including the works of Adam Smith and Turgot, Jean-Baptiste Say, Frederic Bastiat, and François Quesnay. Part 1. Biography. While details regarding Richard Cantillon's life are scarce, it is thought that he was born sometime during the 1680s in County Kerry, Ireland. He was son to landowner Richard Cantillon of Ballyhaig. Sometime in the middle of the first decade of the 18th century, Cantillon moved to France, where he attained French citizenship. By 1711, Cantillon found himself in the employment of British Paymaster General James Bridges in Spain, where he organized payments to British prisoners of war during the War of Spanish Succession. Cantillon remained in Spain until 1714, cultivating a number of business and political connections, before returning to Paris. Cantillon then became involved in the banking industry, working for a cousin, who at the time was lead correspondent of the Parisian branch of a family bank. 2 years later, thanks in large part to financial backing by James Bridges, Cantillon bought his cousin out and attained ownership of the bank. Given the financial and political connections Cantillon was able to attain both through his family and through James Bridges, Cantillon proved a fairly successful banker, specializing in money transfers between Paris and London. At this time, Cantillon became involved with British mercantilist John Law through the Mississippi Company. Based on the monetary theory proposed by William Potter in his 1650 tract The Key of Wealth, John Law posited that increases in the money supply would lead to the employment of unused land and labor, leading to higher productivity. In 1716, the French government granted him both permission to found the Banque Generale and virtual monopoly over the right to develop French territories in North America, named the Mississippi Company. In return, Law promised the French government to finance its debt at lower rates of interest. Law began a financial speculative bubble by selling shares of the Mississippi Company, using the Banque Generale's virtual monopoly on the issue of bank notes to finance his investors. Richard Cantillon amassed a great fortune from his speculation, buying Mississippi Company shares early and selling them at inflated prices. Cantillon's financial success and growing influence caused friction in his relationship with John Law, and sometime thereafter Law threatened to imprison Cantillon if the latter did not leave France within 24 hours. Cantillon replied, "I shall not go away, but I will make your system succeed." To that end, in 1718 Law, Cantillon, and wealthy speculator Joseph Gage formed a private company centered on financing further speculation in North American real estate. In 1719, Cantillon left Paris for Amsterdam, returning briefly in early 1720. Lending in Paris, Cantillon had outlying debt repaid to him in London and Amsterdam. With the collapse of the Mississippi bubble, Cantillon was able to collect on debt accruing high rates of interest. Most of his debtors had suffered financial damage in the bubble collapse and blamed Cantillon until his death. Cantillon was involved in countless lawsuits filed by his debtors, leading to a number of murder plots and criminal accusations. On the 16th of February 1722, Cantillon married Mary Mahony, daughter of Count Daniel O'Mahony, a wealthy merchant and former Irish general, spending much of the remainder of the 1720s traveling throughout Europe with his wife. Cantillon and Mary had 2 children, a son who died at an early age and a daughter, Henrietta, who would go on to marry William Howard, Earl of Stafford in 1743. Although he frequently returned to Paris between 1729 and 1733, his permanent residence was in London. In May 1734, his residence in London was burned to the ground, and it is generally assumed that Cantillon died in the fire. While the fire's causes are unclear, the most widely accepted theory is that Cantillon was murdered. One of Cantillon's biographers, Antoine Murphy, has advanced the alternative theory that Cantillon staged his own death to escape the harassment of his debtors, appearing in Suriname under the name Chevalier de Louvigny. Part 2. Contributions to Economics. Although there is evidence that Richard Cantillon wrote a wide variety of manuscripts, only his Essai sur la nature du commerce en général, abbreviated Essai, survives. Written in 1730, it was published in French in 1755, and was translated into English by Henry Higgs in 1932. Evidence suggests that Essai had tremendous influence on the early development of economic science. However, Cantillon's treatise was largely neglected during the 19th century. In the late 19th century, and it was rediscovered by William Stanley Jevons, who considered it the cradle of political economy. Since then, Cantillon's Essai has received growing attention. Essai is considered the first complete treatise on economic theory, and Cantillon has been called the father of enterprise economics. One of the greatest influences on Cantillon's writing was English economist William Petty and his 1662 tract treatise on taxes. Although Petty provided much of the groundwork for Cantillon's Essai, Anthony Brewer argues that Petty's influence has been overstated. Apart from Petty, other possible influences on Cantillon include John Locke, Cicero, Livy, Pliny the Elder, Pliny the Younger, Charles Avenant, Edmund Halley, Isaac Newton, Sebastian Lepresta de Vauban, and Jean Boyest. Cantillon's involvement in John Law's speculative bubble proved invaluable and likely heavily influenced his insight on the relationship between increases in the supply of money, price, and production. Part 2. Contributions to Economics. Chapter 1. Methodology. Cantillon's Essai is written using a distinctive causal methodology, separating Cantillon from his mercantilist predecessors. Essai is peppered with the word natural, which in